The bullet that killed Catherine Whitmore 3 years ago might as well have killed her husband too. Except Colt Whitmore kept breathing for the sake of his 2 children, who needed him more than he needed peace. Jerome, Arizona sat perched on Cleopatra Hill like a crown of rust and determination, its copper mines bleeding wealth from the earth while its saloons bled men of their earnings every Saturday night. The year was 1884, and the town thrived with the kind of reckless energy that came from striking it rich or dying in the attempt. Colt had no interest in either anymore. He worked his small ranch on the outskirts, raised his cattle, and tried to raise his children without the woman who had made everything make sense. His daughter Emma was 9 now, dark-haired and serious in ways that broke his heart daily. His son Thomas, only 6, had Catherine's green eyes and the same laugh she used to have before consumption took her voice, then her breath, then everything else. Colt fed them, clothed them, taught them what he could about reading and numbers and staying alive in a territory that could kill you as easily as it could make you. But he knew he was failing them in the ways that mattered most. Emma's dresses were always a little wrinkled, her hair braided but never quite right. Thomas cried sometimes at night, and Colt would sit on the edge of his bed with rough, helpless hands, wishing he knew the words Catherine would have known. The advertisement went up in the general store on a Tuesday morning in late April. Schoolteacher wanted. Jerome, Arizona. Room and board provided. Apply to Mayor Henderson. Colt saw it while buying supplies, but thought nothing of it. The town had been without a proper teacher for nearly a year, since the last one had married a mine foreman and moved to Prescott. The children ran half wild, learning what they could from their mothers or from the few books scattered among the families who owned any. It was Emma who mentioned it first, 3 days later, while Colt was mending a fence post that had rotted through. She stood beside him in the afternoon sun, holding the nails with careful precision the way he had taught her. "Papa, Miss Henderson said a new teacher is coming to town." A lady from back east. Colt hammered another nail home, squinting against the glare. "That's so," she said. "The lady is young and pretty and knows everything about reading and history and arithmetic." Emma's voice carried a wistfulness that made him pause mid-swing. "Thomas and I could go to school again." He looked down at his daughter, at the hope carefully hidden in her expression, and felt the familiar weight of his inadequacy settle heavier on his shoulders. "I have been teaching you both." "I know, Papa," she said it quickly, loyally. "You are a very good teacher. But Thomas asked me yesterday what Mama used to smell like, and I could not quite remember, and I thought maybe a lady teacher could help us remember things better." The hammer hung loose in Colt's hand. He set it down on the fence post and crouched to Emma's level, seeing the tears she was trying not to shed. "A lady teacher cannot bring your mama back, sweetheart. I know." Emma's voice was very small, but maybe she could teach us the things Mama would have taught us. "The things you do not know how to teach us because you are a papa, not a mama." Colt pulled his daughter close, breathing in the scent of sun and dust, and the soap he always used too much of when washing her hair. "If this teacher comes, you and Thomas will go to school, I promise." Larissa Kendrick arrived in Jerome on the afternoon stage 2 weeks later, and the entire town turned out to see her, because there was precious little entertainment otherwise, and new arrivals always caused speculation. She stepped down from the coach in a traveling dress the color of creek water, practical but well made, her dark blonde hair pinned up under a sensible hat. She was 24 years old, educated at a women's seminary in Philadelphia, and possessed of the kind of determined optimism that had not yet been beaten out of her by hard reality. Colt was not there to see her arrival. He was branding cattle in his south pasture, shirtless in the heat, sweat running down his back while his two hired hands worked the ropes and the fire. He did not think about the new schoolteacher at all. He thought about the drought that threatened his water supply, and the fence that needed replacing along the eastern border, and whether Thomas's cough meant something serious or just the dust that got into everyone's lungs in this dry country. He did not meet Larissa Kendrick until Sunday, when Emma insisted they attend church services. Colt avoided church mostly, finding no comfort in words about mercy and providence when his wife had died slowly and painfully despite every prayer he had offered. But Emma had asked with that particular tone in her voice, the one that meant she was asking for something that mattered. So he put on his cleanest shirt and made Thomas wash behind his ears, and they rode into town in the wagon. The church was a simple wooden structure that also served as the schoolhouse during the week. Families filled the rough-hewn pews, miners and ranchers and shopkeepers and their wives, everyone dressed in their Sunday approximation of respectability. Colt found a spot near the back, Emma on one side and Thomas on the other, and tried to ignore the sidelong glances from the unmarried women and widows who had been trying to catch his attention for the past 2 years. The new schoolteacher sat in the front row beside Mayor Henderson and his wife. Colt could only see the back of her head, the neat coil of her hair, the straight line of her spine. Reverend Mitchell droned through his sermon about charity and Christian duty, and Colt's mind wandered to the 100 tasks waiting for him back at the ranch. Then the service ended, and Emma grabbed his hand with surprising strength. "Papa, I want to meet the new teacher." Before he could respond, his daughter was pulling him forward through the congregation, Thomas trailing behind them. People parted, offering greetings that Colt returned automatically. Then they were standing in front of Mayor Henderson, and the mayor was smiling with the heartiness of a man who considered every newcomer a personal achievement. "Colt Whitmore, good to see you out. Let me introduce Miss Larissa Kendrick, our new schoolteacher. Miss Kendrick, this is Colt Whitmore, one of our local ranchers." Colt removed his hat and found himself looking into eyes the color of honey in sunlight. Larissa Kendrick was pretty in an understated way, with a spattering of freckles across her nose and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily. But it was her expression that caught him off guard, the keen intelligence and warm interest as she looked at him, then down at his children. "Mr. Whitmore, how nice to meet you." Her voice had the cultured tones of back east, but without the condescension that often came with it. Then she crouched down, not seeming to care about the dust on the floor, and smiled at Emma and Thomas. "And who are these fine young people?" Emma, who had dragged him over here, suddenly seemed struck shy. Thomas hid partially behind Colt's leg. Larissa did not seem bothered. She simply waited, patient and kind, until Emma managed to speak. "I am Emma Whitmore, and this is my brother Thomas." "We are very pleased to meet you, Miss Kendrick. I am equally pleased to meet you both. Will you be attending school?" Emma nodded eagerly. Thomas peeked out from behind Colt's leg, his green eyes curious. "How old are you, Emma?" "9, madam. Thomas is 6. Perfect ages for learning." Larissa's smile widened. "I am starting classes tomorrow. I hope to see you both there." "We will be there," Emma said with such certainty that Colt almost laughed. Then his daughter did something that surprised him. She reached out and touched the lace at the cuff of Larissa's sleeve, just a brief, gentle touch. "That is very pretty." Something shifted in Larissa's expression, a softness that seemed to understand more than the simple compliment. "Thank you, Emma. My sister made this lace for me before I left Philadelphia. It reminds me of home." "Our mama used to make pretty things," Thomas said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper, "but she died." The words fell like stones into water. Colt felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the grief that never quite left. He started to speak, to apologize, to pull his children away, but Larissa was already responding. "I am very sorry for your loss." She said it simply, without the excessive pity that always made Colt angry. "It must be very hard to miss her." "Papa misses her most," Emma said, and Colt wanted to disappear through the floorboards. "He gets sad at night sometimes. We hear him walking around." "Emma." His voice came out rougher than he intended. "That is enough." But Larissa was looking up at him now with those honey-colored eyes, and there was understanding there, not pity. Understanding was somehow worse because it made him feel exposed. "School starts at 8 o'clock, she said, rising gracefully to her feet. "I look forward to having Emma and Thomas in class." Colt managed something that might have been agreement, got his hat back on his head, and shepherded his children toward the door. Behind him, he could hear Mayor Henderson introducing Larissa to someone else, her voice warm and engaged. He did not look back. On Monday morning, Colt brought his children to school. The classroom was already transforming under Larissa's influence. She had somehow acquired curtains for the windows, actual curtains with a small floral pattern, and the desks had been arranged in neat rows. A slate board hung on the front wall, and she had written the alphabet across it in perfect, flowing script. 8 other children were already there, ranging from 5 to 13, sitting with varying degrees of eagerness and reluctance. Larissa stood at the front, wearing a simple blue dress with a white collar, looking calm and prepared. Emma walked in confidently, found a desk, and sat with her hands folded. Thomas clung to Colt's hand, suddenly uncertain. "Papa, will you stay?" "I cannot stay, son. I have work to do." "What if I need you?" Larissa approached then, moving quietly so as not to startle. "Thomas, I wonder if you might help me with something important this morning." Thomas looked at her with wide eyes. "Help you?" "Yes. You see, I do not know where anything is in Jerome yet. I am going to need someone to tell me about the town and the people and all the important things. Do you think you could be my special helper and tell me about Jerome?" Thomas considered this, the fear on his face slowly replaced by interest. "I know where the good creek is." "The one with the flat rocks. That sounds like exactly the kind of information I need." Larissa held out her hand, not demanding, just offering. Thomas looked up at Colt, who nodded. Then his son let go of his hand and took Larissa's instead. Colt left before the strange tightness in his throat could become something embarrassing. He rode back to his ranch and threw himself into work, mucking stalls and repairing tack and checking on the pregnant mare who was due to foal any day. He tried not to think about his children sitting in that schoolroom, or the way Thomas had taken the teacher's hand so easily, or how long it had been since anyone other than him had touched his children with such gentle care. When he picked Emma and Thomas up that afternoon, they were both chattering with an excitement he had not heard in months. "Miss Kendrick knows everything, Papa," Emma said, bouncing on the wagon seat. "She told us about ancient Rome and showed us where Philadelphia is on a map and taught us a song about the alphabet. She let me ring the bell for recess," Thomas added, "and she said my numbers were very neat." "That's so." Colt kept his eyes on the road, trying to sort through the complicated feeling in his chest. "She is very pretty," Emma said thoughtfully, "and she smells like lavender, not like Mama, but nice." "Emma." The warning was automatic. "I am just saying she is nice, Papa." She asked about Mama. She wanted to know what Mama was like. That made him turn his head. "She asked about your mother." "Yes. During lunch, she ate with us outside and she asked what Mama liked to do and if we remembered stories about her. I told her about how Mama used to sing while she cooked, and Thomas told her about the time Mama let him help make bread and he got flour everywhere." Colt's hands tightened on the reins. That was not her place to ask about. Why not? Emma's voice carried a stubborn edge she had definitely inherited from Catherine. We like talking about Mama. You never want to talk about her. The accusation hung in the air between them. Colt had no answer that would satisfy his daughter because she was right. He avoided talking about Catherine because every memory was a knife to the heart, and he had to keep functioning, had to keep the ranch running and his children fed and clothed. He did not have the luxury of drowning in grief. They rode the rest of the way home in silence. That night, after the children were in bed, Colt sat on his porch and smoked his pipe, staring out at the dark shapes of the hills against the star-filled sky. He could hear coyotes in the distance, their yips and howls an old familiar sound. The ranch was quiet otherwise, just the occasional sound of the horses moving in the barn, the rustle of wind through the scrub brush. He thought about Larissa Kendrick asking his children about their mother. Part of him was angry about it, defensive of his family's private pain. But another part, a part he did not want to acknowledge, recognized that maybe Emma and Thomas needed to talk about Catherine with someone who would listen without falling apart. Someone who had not lost what he had lost. The week continued, and the children went to school each day with increasing enthusiasm. Emma came home with careful handwriting practice and stories about the poetry Miss Kendrick had read aloud. Thomas learned a song about the states and territories, and sang it constantly until Colt knew all the words against his will. He saw Larissa only in passing, when he dropped the children off or picked them up, and they exchanged polite nods and brief pleasantries. Then Saturday came, and with it, the kind of crisis that seemed to find Colt with reliable frequency. His mare foaled wrong. He found her in the barn at dawn, already in labor, the foal coming breech. He sent one of his hired hands for the veterinarian in town, but the mare could not wait. Colt stripped to his shirt sleeves, rolled them up, and did what needed doing with hands as gentle as he could make them and prayers he was not sure anyone was listening to. The mare screamed and thrashed, and it took all his strength and skill to turn the foal, to bring it into the world alive. When it was over, he had a leggy colt nursing shakily and a mare who would recover, and his shirt was ruined and he was exhausted, and it was nearly 9 in the morning. He had forgotten completely that Emma had mentioned something about a school social, some kind of community gathering that Larissa was organizing. His daughter appeared in the barn doorway, dressed in her Sunday dress, her hair carefully braided. "Papa, we are supposed to be at the schoolhouse right now." Colt looked down at himself, at the blood and birth fluids covering his shirt and arms. "Emma, I cannot go anywhere like this. But Miss Kendrick is expecting us. Everyone will be there. I need to clean up and the mare needs watching and I am exhausted, sweetheart. You and Thomas can go. I will take you." Emma's face fell in a way that made him feel like the worst father in the territory. "But it is a family social. We are supposed to bring food and meet families." "I made biscuits this morning before you woke up, and Thomas helped." He had not even known she could make biscuits on her own. The realization of how much his daughter was growing up without his notice hit him hard. "Emma, I am sorry, but I cannot. It is fine." Her voice was flat now, the disappointment carefully hidden. "We will stay home." She turned to leave, and something in Colt broke a little. He thought of Catherine, who would have made this work somehow, who would have found a way to clean him up and get them all to town and make their children feel like they mattered. He was failing them again, choosing the safe, easy option of staying home instead of pushing through his own discomfort. "Wait." The word came out harsh. Emma stopped. "Give me 20 minutes to wash and change. We will go." His daughter's face lit up like sunrise, and Colt knew he would have done anything to keep that expression there. "Really, really. Tell Thomas to get ready." 20 minutes later, they were in the wagon headed to town, Colt in clean clothes with damp hair and eyes gritty with exhaustion. Emma sat beside him with a basket of biscuits that were slightly burned on the bottom, but had been made with such care that he would have eaten them charred to ash. Thomas held a jar of preserves they had bought from the general store, his contribution to the social. The schoolhouse was full of people when they arrived. Families clustered in groups, children ran between the adults, and tables along one wall sagged under the weight of contributed food. Larissa stood near the center of it all, talking with one of the miners' wives, and she looked up when the door opened. Her gaze found Colt's immediately, and something passed between them, some wordless acknowledgement. Then Emma was pulling him inside, and Thomas was adding their preserves to the food table, and they were absorbed into the gathering. Larissa made her way over eventually, weaving through the crowd with unconscious grace. "Mr. Whitmore, I am so glad you could come. Emma mentioned you might be too busy. Mare foaled this morning, breech birth." He did not know why he was explaining himself to her. Took some time. Understanding flickered across her face. "Is the foal healthy?" "Seems to be. The mare too. That must have been difficult work." "I appreciate you making the effort to come anyway." She smiled down at Emma, who was practically glowing with happiness. "Your daughter has been a wonderful help organizing this gathering. She suggested we do a recitation later, with the children sharing what they have learned this week." Emma flushed with pleasure. Colt stared at his daughter, seeing a confidence there that had been slowly emerging over the past week. "That right. Emma has a gift for leadership, and Thomas has been helping the younger children with their alphabet. They are both excellent students." Larissa said it naturally, without exaggeration, and Colt felt an uncomfortable swell of pride mixed with something else. Gratitude, maybe. That someone saw his children clearly and valued them. "Thank you for teaching them well. It is not hard to teach children who are eager to learn." She paused, then added more quietly, "They talk about you quite a bit, you know, about the ranch and the work you do. They are very proud of you." The words hit him unexpectedly. He did not feel like someone his children should be proud of. He felt like a man barely holding things together, failing at the parts of parenting that required softness and emotional availability. Before he could formulate a response, Mayor Henderson called for attention, and the recitations began. Colt watched his children stand up with the others and recite poetry, demonstrate arithmetic on the slate board, and sing the songs they had learned. Emma spoke clearly and confidently, her voice carrying through the room. Thomas stumbled over a few words but kept going, his small face serious with concentration. Other parents watched with similar expressions of surprise and pride, seeing their children's progress made visible. When it was over, Larissa thanked everyone for coming and invited them to eat. The gathering dissolved into casual conversation and food. Colt found himself standing somewhat apart, holding a cup of coffee and watching his children play with the others, when Larissa approached again. "You looked surprised during the recitations." He considered denying it, then decided there was no point. "I did not realize how much they were learning. I thought I was doing well enough with their education, but I see now I was just teaching them facts. You are teaching them confidence. You are doing better than you think, Mr. Whitmore." Her voice was gentle but firm. "Your children are well-mannered, kind, and curious. That does not happen by accident. Their mother did most of that work before she died. Perhaps. But they have learned resilience from you. They have learned to keep going even when things are hard. That is no small thing." Colt turned to look at her directly, really look at her for the first time. Larissa Kendrick had kind eyes and a directness that he was not accustomed to in women, who usually either flirted or pitied around him. She seemed to see him as a person, not a tragedy or an opportunity. "Why did you come out here?" The question emerged before he could stop it. From Philadelphia to a rough mining town in the middle of nowhere. She smiled slightly. I wanted to make a difference. I know that sounds naive. It sounds idealistic. Those are not always bad things. She sipped her own coffee, her gaze distant. I was engaged back home, to a man my father approved of who had a good position with a law firm. Everything was arranged, everything was perfect. And I realized I did not want a perfect life that had been planned by other people. I wanted to see if I could build something meaningful on my own. So you came to the Arizona Territory. So I came to the Arizona Territory. Her smile widened. My father threatened to disown me. My mother cried for a week. My former fiancé told me I would come crawling back when I realized how hard life is without his protection. Will you go back? No. The certainty in her voice was absolute. I like it here. It is hard and dusty and nothing like Philadelphia, but it is real. The people are real. The work matters. Before Colt could respond, Thomas ran over and grabbed his hand. Papa, can we stay longer? Miss Kendrick said she might tell a story. Larissa laughed. I did promise a story, did I not? Would you like to hear one too, Mr. Whitmore? He should have said no. He should have taken his children home and maintained the careful distance he had built between himself and the rest of the world. But Emma was watching him with hopeful eyes, and Thomas was tugging on his hand, and Larissa was looking at him with that direct, honest gaze that made him feel seen in ways he had forgotten were possible. I suppose one story would not hurt. They all gathered in a circle, children and parents alike, while Larissa told a tale about a pioneer family crossing the plains, about their courage and their struggles and their eventual triumph. She was a gifted storyteller, her voice rising and falling with the narrative, her gestures painting pictures in the air. Colt found himself drawn in despite his intentions, watching her instead of listening, seeing the passion she brought to something as simple as a story told to children. When it ended and families began to leave, Emma and Thomas thanked Miss Kendrick with careful politeness, and Colt added his own thanks. Larissa saw them to the door, and just before they left, she touched Colt's arm lightly. Thank you for coming. I know it was not easy with the morning you had. The children wanted to be here. Still, it matters that you brought them. She hesitated, then added, if you ever need anything, Mr. Whitmore, for Emma and Thomas, please do not hesitate to ask. I am here to help. He nodded, not trusting himself to speak, and ushered his children out into the afternoon sun. The weeks rolled forward into May, and the weather turned hot and dry. The drought Colt had been worried about materialized into reality, with the creek on his property running lower each day. He spent his time managing water resources, hauling extra from town when necessary, and trying to keep his cattle healthy on increasingly sparse grazing. It was exhausting work that left him falling into bed each night too tired to dream. The children continued school, and their attachment to Miss Kendrick grew more evident daily. Emma started talking about becoming a teacher herself one day. Thomas asked if Miss Kendrick could come to dinner sometime, a request Colt deflected without directly refusing. He told himself he was simply being careful, maintaining appropriate boundaries. He did not examine too closely why the thought of Larissa Kendrick sitting at his dinner table made his heart beat faster. Then, Emma got sick. It started with a cough, and Colt's blood went cold because that was how it had started with Catherine. He watched his daughter like a hawk, feeling for fever, listening to her breathing. When she did not improve after 3 days, he drove into town to fetch Doc Morrison. The doctor examined Emma in her bedroom while Colt stood in the doorway trying not to let his fear show. Thomas sat on the porch with one of the ranch hands, kept away from potential contagion. When Doc Morrison finally emerged, His expression was serious but not grave. "It is not consumption, Colt. Just a bad chest cold. Keep her warm, give her plenty of fluids, and she should recover in a week or so." The relief nearly buckled Colt's knees. "You are certain?" "As certain as I can be, but she needs rest and care. No school until she is fully recovered." After the doctor left, Colt sent word to the schoolhouse with one of his hands, letting Miss Kendrick know that Emma would be absent. He expected a polite acknowledgement. Instead, the next afternoon, Larissa Kendrick appeared at his ranch. He was in the barn when he heard the sound of a horse approaching. He emerged to find her dismounting from a borrowed mare, wearing a riding habit that had seen better days and carrying a basket over one arm. Dust streaked her face, and her hair was coming loose from its pins. "Miss Kendrick." He could not keep the surprise from his voice. "What are you doing here?" "I came to check on Emma and bring some things that might help." She lifted the basket. "Honey for tea, some books to keep her occupied, and a recipe for a poultice my mother used to make for chest congestion." Colt stared at her. "You rode all the way out here for that?" "Emma is my student. Of course I came." She said it as if it were obvious, as if teachers regularly rode several miles to check on sick children. Maybe back east they did, but not in his experience. He led her inside, suddenly conscious of the state of his house. It was clean enough but masculine in a way that betrayed the absence of a woman's touch. Dishes were stacked neatly, but there were no curtains, no decorations, nothing soft. Larissa did not seem to notice or care. She set her basket on the table and immediately asked to see Emma. Colt took her to his daughter's room, where Emma lay propped up on pillows, her face flushed with low fever. When she saw Larissa, her expression brightened immediately. "Miss Kendrick, you came." "Of course I came." Larissa sat on the edge of the bed with easy familiarity, feeling Emma's forehead with a practiced hand. "Your father said you were unwell, and I wanted to make sure you had everything you needed. I have been so bored. Papa does not know any good stories." "I heard that," Colt said from the doorway, but there was no heat in it. Emma grinned weakly. Larissa spent an hour with Emma, reading to her, mixing the honey into tea that she somehow got from Colt's kitchen, and talking about what the class was learning so Emma would not fall behind. Colt stood in the doorway watching, seeing the easy tenderness between teacher and student, the way Emma responded to Larissa's presence with a trust and affection that both warmed and worried him. When Larissa finally emerged from the bedroom, Emma was sleeping peacefully. They walked back to the kitchen, and Colt found himself offering coffee without thinking about it. She accepted, and they sat at his rough wooden table in the late afternoon light. "Thank you for coming," he said finally. It meant a lot to her. She is a special girl. They both are. Larissa cradled her coffee cup in both hands. "How are you managing?" "Managing what?" "Everything. The ranch, the children, the worry. It cannot be easy doing it all alone." The directness of the question disarmed him. Most people danced around his situation, offering vague sympathies without acknowledging the daily grinding reality of it. "I do what needs doing." "That is not what I asked." Colt met her eyes across the table. "Some days are harder than others. Today, when the doctor said it was not consumption, I could breathe again. Other days, I feel like I am drowning and just barely keeping my head above water, but the children need me, so I keep going. That is all any of us can do." She paused, then asked gently, "Do you have family?" "Anyone who helps. Catherine's parents died before we married. Mine passed when I was 20. I have a brother in California, but we have not spoken in years. There was a falling out." He did not elaborate, and she did not push. "It is just us. That is a heavy load to carry. I do not have a choice about the weight. I only have a choice about whether I carry it or collapse under it." Larissa studied him for a long moment, and he had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen, not just looked at. You are a good father, Mr. Whitmore. I hope you know that. I am trying to be. Trying is what matters. She finished her coffee and stood. I should get back before dark, but I left the recipe for the poultice and I will check on Emma again in a few days if that is acceptable. You do not have to do that. I know, I want to. Colt walked her out to her horse, helping her mount in a gesture of automatic courtesy. Before she could ride away, he found himself speaking again. Miss Kendrick, why do you care so much? About my children specifically? You have other students. She looked down at him from the saddle, her expression thoughtful. Because they remind me why I came here. Because they are trying so hard to be brave and strong and normal, and I see how much they are missing their mother in every careful gesture. Because I think I can help, even in small ways. And because their father is clearly doing his best under impossible circumstances, and everyone deserves help when they need it. Then she rode away before he could respond, leaving him standing in his yard with too many feelings he did not know how to name. Emma recovered over the next week, and true to her word, Larissa visited twice more. On her second visit, she brought Thomas with her, and the children played while she and Colt talked on the porch. They spoke about inconsequential things mostly, the weather and the drought and the gossip from town. But underneath the surface conversation, Colt felt something growing, some connection he had not asked for and did not know what to do with. He was not ready. He would never be ready. Catherine had been his whole heart, and when she died, he had locked that heart away somewhere safe where it could not be hurt again. Larissa Kendrick was dangerous because she made him think about unlocking it, and that terrified him more than any physical threat could. So he did what he had been doing for 3 years. He focused on work, on his children, on the tangible problems he could solve with his hands and his labor. He did not think about honey-colored eyes or the sound of Larissa's laugh. He did not imagine what it might be like to have someone to talk to at the end of a long day, someone who saw him as more than just a father or a rancher or a widower. Except late at night, alone in the bed he had once shared with Catherine, he did think about those things. And that made him feel guilty and disloyal and confused, so he thought about them even more, trapped in a cycle of his own making. June arrived with brutal heat and no rain. The drought worsened, and tensions rose in Jerome as water became increasingly scarce. The mines used vast quantities of water in their operations, and the ranchers and farmers needed it for their livestock and crops. Arguments broke out at town meetings, and the mayor tried to mediate an increasingly impossible situation. Colt's Creek ran dry completely by mid-month. He was hauling water from town daily now, a time-consuming and expensive process that ate into his resources. Other ranchers were in the same situation, and there was talk of some having to sell their cattle at a loss just to avoid watching them die of thirst. It was Emma who came up with the idea, and it spoke to how much Larissa had influenced his daughter's thinking. They were eating dinner, a simple meal of beans and cornbread, when Emma said, "Papa, why do we not ask Miss Kendrick if she knows about solving water problems?" Thomas nodded enthusiastically. "Miss Kendrick knows everything." Colt smiled despite himself. "I do not think teachers learn about water management in their seminaries, sweetheart. But she reads all the time. Maybe she reads something that could help." It was child's logic, sweet and naive, and Colt did not take it seriously. But 2 days later he ran into Larissa in town while he was at the general store, and she asked how he was managing with the drought. "Not well," he admitted, too tired to pretend otherwise. "At this rate, I will have to start selling cattle just to afford to keep the rest alive." "Have you considered a windmill?" He blinked. "A what?" "A windmill. For pumping water. I read about them in a farming journal." They are becoming more common in dry areas because they can pump groundwater without requiring manual labor or steam engines. She spoke matter-of-factly, as if suggesting something obvious. I believe there is a well driller in Prescott who also installs windmills. Colt stared at her. You read farming journals. I read everything I can get my hands on. Living in a small town with limited entertainment encourages wide reading. She smiled. I could lend you the journal if you would like. It has specifications and cost estimates. I would appreciate that. She brought the journal to school the next day, and Colt spent that evening reading it by lamplight. The information was detailed and technical, but the basic concept was sound. A windmill could pump water from deep underground, where it remained available even during droughts, and Arizona had plenty of wind. The initial cost was significant, but compared to losing his herd or slowly going bankrupt hauling water, it was an investment worth considering. He made inquiries, got estimates, and crunched numbers until his head hurt. In the end, he decided to take the risk. He contacted the well driller in Prescott and arranged for the work to begin in July. When he told Emma and Thomas about the windmill, they were excited in the way children get excited about anything mechanical and novel. But Emma's first comment was, "You should thank Miss Kendrick. It was her idea." "I will." He found Larissa after school the next day, waiting while she straightened the classroom and prepared for the next day's lessons. She looked up when he entered, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Whitmore, is everything all right? I wanted to thank you for the information about windmills. I am having one installed next month." Her face lit up with genuine pleasure. "That is wonderful. I am so glad it will help. You may have saved my ranch. That is not a small thing. I just shared information I happen to have. You are the one making the difficult decision and investment. Still, thank you." He hesitated, then added, "Emma said I should invite you to dinner, to thank you properly, if you would like to come." The invitation emerged awkwardly, and he immediately wanted to take it back. But Larissa's expression softened into something warm and pleased. "I would like that very much." They arranged for Sunday evening, which gave Colt several days to panic about the state of his house and his cooking skills. He cleaned with more thoroughness than strictly necessary, enlisted Emma's help in making the house presentable, and planned a menu that was within his limited capabilities. Emma watched his efforts with poorly concealed amusement. "Papa, you are acting very strange." "I am attempting to be a good host. You like Miss Kendrick." It was not a question. Colt stopped scrubbing the floor and looked at his daughter. "She is your teacher. I am being respectful. Thomas and I think you should marry her." The bluntness of it made him speechless for a moment. "Emma, that is not an appropriate thing to say." "Why not? She is nice and smart and pretty. You are lonely. She would be a good mama." "She is not your mother, and no one could replace your mother. Do not ever think that." Emma's expression turned serious. "I know she is not Mama. But Mama is not here and Miss Kendrick is. And you are sad all the time, Papa, even when you pretend you are not." The perception of children was brutal sometimes. Colt sat back on his heels, the scrub brush dripping in his hand. "I am not looking to remarry, sweetheart. That is not why I invited Miss Kendrick to dinner. But would it be so bad if you did want to remarry someday?" He did not have an answer that would not hurt her or lie to her, so he just said, "Let us take things one day at a time." Sunday arrived with clear skies and temperatures that made the inside of the house marginally more bearable than a furnace. Colt spent the afternoon cooking, with Emma supervising, and Thomas setting the table with elaborate care. By the time Larissa arrived in the early evening, driven out by one of the ranch hands Colt had sent to fetch her, the house smelled like roasted chicken and baking bread, and Colt was questioning every decision that had led to this moment. She wore a simple dress the color of sage, and she had brought a pie she had made herself, and she smiled at him with such genuine warmth that some of his tension eased. "Thank you for having me. Your home is lovely." It was not lovely. It was a working ranch house, functional and plain. But she said it like she meant it, and Emma and Thomas welcomed her with the enthusiasm of children who had been looking forward to this all week. Dinner was surprisingly easy. They talked about school and the children's progress, and the upcoming July 4th celebration the town was planning. Larissa asked Colt about the ranch, and he found himself talking more than he usually did, explaining the work and the challenges and the small victories that made it worthwhile. She listened with real interest, asking intelligent questions that showed she was paying attention. After dinner, while they ate the pie she had brought, Emma did what Colt should have expected but had not prepared for. "Miss Kendrick, do you think our papa is handsome?" Colt nearly choked on his coffee. "Emma," but Larissa just laughed, unbothered by the impropriety of the question. "I think your papa is very handsome, yes. Do you want to get married someday?" "Emma, that is enough." Colt's voice was sharp now, embarrassment heating his face. "I would like to get married someday to the right person," Larissa answered calmly, "but those things happen in their own time." "Our papa needs a wife," Thomas announced, oblivious to Colt's distress. "He is lonely and he does not know how to braid hair good." "That is it. Both of you outside now." Colt pointed to the door. The children went, giggling, and Colt was left alone with Larissa, wishing the floor would open and swallow him. "I apologize. I did not tell them to say those things." "I know you did not." She was smiling, not mocking but amused. "They are children. They say what they are thinking." It was inappropriate. It was honest. She paused, then added more seriously, "For what it is worth, they are clearly not trying to replace their mother. They talk about her often with love and respect, but they want you to be happy, Mr. Whitmore. That is not a bad thing." "Colt." The name emerged without his permission. "You should call me Colt. Only if you call me Larissa." They looked at each other across the table, and something shifted between them, some acknowledgement that they had moved past the formal boundaries of teacher and parent into something more complicated. "My children like you very much," Colt said finally. "I like them very much too. They are wonderful, bright, kind children. You have raised them well. Catherine raised them. I am just trying not to ruin what she built." Larissa reached across the table, not quite touching his hand but close enough that he could feel the warmth of her skin. "You are doing more than that. You are teaching them resilience and strength. Those are gifts too." Colt wanted to turn his hand over to close the small distance and touch her. He did not. He was not ready, might never be ready. But for the first time in 3 years, he wanted something beyond just surviving. And that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. The evening ended with Colt driving Larissa back to town, the children coming along for the ride despite the late hour. They chattered in the back of the wagon while Colt and Larissa sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge in the deepening sky. When they reached the boarding house where she rented a room, Colt helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering on her waist a moment longer than strictly necessary. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "Thank you for inviting me. I had a wonderful time. We should do it again sometime." "I would like that." He drove home with his children half asleep against each other in the wagon bed, and his mind full of possibilities he had not allowed himself to consider in a very long time. July brought the well driller and his crew, along with the components for the windmill. Colt watched them work with a mixture of fascination and anxiety, seeing his investment take physical form. The drill bit down through layers of earth and rock, seeking the underground water that would save his ranch. When they struck it at 100 feet, the relief was overwhelming. The windmill went up over the next week, a tall wooden tower with great spinning blades that caught the constant Arizona wind and turned it into mechanical motion. The pump engaged and water flowed, clear and abundant, into the stock tank. Colt stood watching it with something like awe, this simple machine solving a problem that had been slowly destroying him. Emma and Thomas were fascinated by the windmill, and when Larissa came to visit the next Sunday, they insisted on showing her immediately. She stood beside Colt watching the blades turn, her face bright with pleasure. "It works perfectly. Thanks to you. Thanks to your willingness to try something new." She turned to look at him. "That takes courage. Desperation, more like." "There is a difference between desperate and defeated. You did not let yourself be defeated." They walked slowly back to the house, the children running ahead, and Colt found himself asking, "Why did you really come to Jerome, Larissa? The whole truth?" She was quiet for a moment, considering. "I told you about my engagement. What I did not say was that I did not love him. He was suitable and appropriate, and everyone expected me to be happy about it. But I felt like I was slowly disappearing into someone else's vision of who I should be. Coming here was about reclaiming myself. About finding out who I am when I am not performing for other people." "Have you found out who you are?" "I am finding out. It is an ongoing process." She smiled at him. "What about you? Who were you before you became a father and a widower?" The question struck deep. Colt realized he had not thought of himself as anything but those two identities in years. "I do not know any more. I was young and foolish and in love with Catherine. I thought we would grow old together, raise our children, build something lasting. When she died, all those plans died too. I had to become someone different just to survive. And who is that person? Someone who does not break, someone who keeps going no matter what, someone who loves his children enough to keep living even when he did not want to." Larissa stopped walking and turned to face him fully. "You are also someone who is kind and strong and more capable than you give yourself credit for. You are someone worth knowing, Colt Whitmore." He did not know what to say to that. No one had seen him as a person separate from his tragedies in so long. It made him feel exposed and vulnerable and strangely hopeful. "You are worth knowing too, Larissa Kendrick." They stood there in the afternoon heat, the sound of his children's laughter drifting back to them, and Colt felt the careful walls he had built around his heart develop their first real cracks. The 4th of July celebration in Jerome was the social event of the summer, a rare day when the mines shut down and everyone gathered for food and games and fireworks. Colt had avoided it the past 2 years, but Emma and Thomas begged to go, and he did not have the heart to refuse them. The main street was decorated with bunting and flags, and long tables were set up for the community meal. There were races for the children, shooting competitions for the men, and a dance planned for the evening. The whole town turned out, miners and ranchers and shopkeepers all mixing in the democratic spirit of a frontier celebration. Colt found himself standing with a group of other ranchers, discussing cattle prices and water rights, while his children ran wild with the other kids. He saw Larissa across the crowd, surrounded by her students and their families, and felt a pull toward her that was becoming harder to ignore. Emma won the girls' foot race, her competitive streak emerging in full force. Thomas came in third in his race but was happy anyway. Colt cheered for both of them, pride swelling in his chest, and caught Larissa's eye across the crowd. She smiled at him, and he smiled back, and it felt significant in ways that scared him. The shooting competition was later, and several men pressured Colt to enter. He resisted at first, not wanting to show off, but eventually relented. He was a good shot, had to be living where he lived, and he won the competition with a consistent accuracy that earned grudging respect from the other participants. As he was collecting his prize, a ribbon and $5, Emma appeared at his side with Larissa in tow. "Papa, Miss Kendrick says there is going to be dancing tonight. Will you dance with her?" Colt looked from his daughter's hopeful face to Larissa's slightly embarrassed one. "I am not much of a dancer." "You used to dance with Mama," Emma insisted. "I remember, you danced in the kitchen and she laughed." The memory hit him like a physical blow. He had danced with Catherine, clumsy and ungraceful, making her laugh with his missteps. It had been one of their private joys, those moments of foolishness and intimacy. "That was a long time ago, sweetheart, but you could dance again, if you wanted to." Emma looked between him and Larissa with the determined expression of a child who had decided to play matchmaker. "Miss Kendrick, would you like to dance with Papa?" "Emma, you are putting Miss Kendrick in an awkward position," Colt said, his embarrassment deepening. "Actually," Larissa said quietly, "I would like that, if you are willing." Colt met her eyes and saw the invitation there, the willingness to risk his rejection, the hope that he might say yes. He thought about Catherine and the guilt of moving forward. He thought about his children who wanted him to be happy. He thought about the way his heart beat faster when Larissa looked at him. "One dance," he agreed. "But I cannot promise I will not step on your feet." Emma beamed like she had won the greatest victory and skipped off to tell Thomas. Larissa stayed, looking up at Colt with those honey-colored eyes. "You do not have to do this if you do not want to. I know your daughter put you on the spot." "I want to." The admission felt momentous. "I am just out of practice at wanting things for myself." "Then we will both be learning as we go." When evening came and the musicians started playing, Colt found Larissa at the edge of the dance area. She had changed into a different dress, something in a deep blue that made her eyes look gold. He offered his hand, she took it, and they moved into the pattern of the dance. He was rusty, his steps uncertain at first, but Larissa was patient and graceful enough for both of them. They moved together through the simple waltz, and Colt felt something in his chest loosen, some tight knot of grief beginning to unravel. "You dance better than you claimed," Larissa said softly. "You are a good partner." They turned and stepped, surrounded by other couples, the music floating through the warm night air. Colt could see his children watching from the sidelines, Emma's face alight with satisfaction. Other people were watching too, he realized. The widower dancing for the first time in 3 years was noteworthy gossip. "People are staring," he murmured. "Let them stare. You are allowed to live, Colt. You are allowed to have moments of happiness." "It feels disloyal to Catherine." Larissa's hand tightened in his. "Do you think she would want you to stop living because she could not?" "I do not know. I think she would want you to be happy. I think she would want your children to see you smile without sadness behind it. I think she loved you enough to want you to find joy again, even if it is with someone else." The words broke something open inside him. He pulled Larissa closer, no longer caring about propriety or gossip, and danced with her like she was the only person in the world. When the song ended, he did not immediately let go. They stood there in the crowd, the next dance starting around them, and Colt knew that something fundamental had shifted. "Thank you," he said finally, "for being patient with me. Take all the time you need. I am not going anywhere." The summer progressed, and Colt found himself drawn to town more often, finding excuses to stop by the school or run into Larissa at the general store. They talked about everything and nothing, building a friendship that felt like the foundation for something more. Emma and Thomas encouraged the relationship with all the subtlety of children, constantly mentioning Miss Kendrick at home and Papa when they were at school. Other people in town began to notice. Some were supportive, pleased to see the widower finding happiness again. Others were critical, thinking 3 years was not long enough to mourn, or that Larissa was too young and too educated for a simple rancher. Colt tried not to care about the gossip, but it gnawed at him, feeding his existing doubts. It was Larissa who finally forced the conversation in late August. She arrived at the ranch unannounced on a Saturday afternoon, finding Colt in the barn repairing a harness. She stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright sunlight, and said, "We need to talk." His stomach dropped. Those words never preceded anything good. About what? About whatever is happening between us. About whether you want it to continue happening, or if I should stop hoping for something that will never come. Colt set down the harness and leatherworking tools. "I did not realize I was giving you false hope. You are not. But you are also not giving me real hope either. You dance with me once, then avoid me for a week. You seek me out, then withdraw. I understand that you are grieving and conflicted, but I need to know if there is any possibility of a future here, or if I am wasting my time caring for someone who will never be able to care back." The directness of it was so purely Larissa that despite his discomfort, Colt almost smiled. "I am afraid," he admitted, "of forgetting Catherine, of my children thinking I am replacing their mother, of not being good enough for you, of failing again. Those are all reasonable fears, but they are not reasons to wall yourself off from living. I know." He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated with himself. "I care about you, Larissa, more than I thought I would ever care about anyone again, but I do not know how to do this, how to be someone who can love again after losing what I lost." She walked toward him slowly, closing the distance between them. "You do not have to know how, you just have to be willing to try. What if I hurt you? What if I cannot be what you need? What if you can? What if we could build something good together?" She reached out and took his hand. "I am not asking for promises you cannot keep, Colt. I am just asking you to stop running from the possibility of us." He looked down at their joined hands, at the contrast of her smaller fingers against his calloused palm. "My children chose you first. Before I even realized what was happening, they chose you. Emma trying to set us up, Thomas asking when you would come visit. They saw something in you that they needed, something I could not give them. They chose me as a teacher and friend. That is different than choosing a mother. Is it? They talk about you constantly. They light up when they see you. Emma asks your opinion before mine now on half the things that matter to her." He met her eyes. "They chose you, and I realized they chose better than I could have, because you are exactly what we need, all three of us. Someone kind and patient and strong enough to deal with our broken family." Larissa's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You are not broken, you are healing. There is a difference. Then help me heal if you are willing. If I have not scared you off with all my doubts and fears and general inability to function like a normal human being." She laughed, and it was the most beautiful sound he had ever heard. "You are fairly functional, all things considered. Is that a yes?" "That is a yes, to trying. To seeing where this goes. To building something together slowly in whatever way works for all of us." Colt pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her in an embrace that felt like coming home. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked under his chin, her hands fisted in his shirt. They stood there in the barn with the dust motes dancing in the sunlight and the smell of hay and horses surrounding them, and Colt let himself feel hope for the first time in 3 years. "My children are going to be insufferable about this," he murmured. "Emma will claim full credit. Emma deserves full credit. She has been orchestrating this from the beginning. Smart girl. She learned it from you. They pulled apart eventually but stayed close, hands linked." "What happens now?" Colt asked. "Now you court me properly. Take me on drives, come to dinner at the boarding house, let people see that we are together. And we tell your children that we are trying to build something slowly and carefully with their blessing. They will give their blessing. They have been giving it for months. Then we are halfway there already. That evening, Colt called Emma and Thomas into the parlor and explained, as best he could, that he and Miss Kendrick were going to spend more time together to see if they might want to build a future together. He braced himself for complicated reactions, concerns about their mother's memory or childish jealousy. Instead, Emma said, "Finally, we have been waiting forever." Thomas just asked, "Does this mean Miss Kendrick will live here and make breakfast?" The simplicity of their acceptance made Colt laugh, releasing tension he had been holding for months. "Eventually, maybe, if things work out, but we are taking our time." "But you like her, right, Papa?" Emma's face was serious now. "You really like her, not just because we do. I really like her. She makes me feel like maybe I can be happy again." "Good. You deserve to be happy." Emma hugged him fiercely. "Mama would want you to be happy." Those words from his daughter meant more than any reassurance he could have given himself. That night, Colt slept better than he had in years. The courtship that followed was old-fashioned and sweet. Colt took Larissa on drives through the countryside, showing her the landmarks and vistas that made Arizona beautiful despite its harshness. They had dinners at the boarding house, chaperoned by the landlady who watched them like a hawk, but seemed to approve. Larissa came to the ranch regularly, helping with Emma and Thomas, slowly integrating herself into their daily life. They talked about everything. Larissa told him about growing up in Philadelphia, about her parents and her sister, about the education that had opened the world to her. Colt talked about Catherine for the first time, really talked about her, sharing memories both painful and beautiful. Larissa listened without jealousy, understanding that his late wife was part of who he was, that honoring that past did not diminish their present. They also talked about the future. What they wanted, what scared them, what they hoped for. Larissa admitted she wanted children of her own someday, but would love Emma and Thomas as if they were hers regardless. Colt confessed he had always wanted more children, but had thought that dream died with Catherine. Together, they began to imagine possibilities. The physical intimacy between them grew slowly, carefully. Held hands became brief kisses, became longer embraces. Colt was rusty at romance, uncertain and fumbling, but Larissa was patient and encouraging. The first time he kissed her properly, behind the schoolhouse after everyone had left, he felt like a young man again, nervous and excited and overwhelmed by feeling. "I am falling in love with you," he told her one evening in September, as they sat on his porch watching the sunset. "I did not think I would ever say those words again. I am falling in love with you too." She leaned against his shoulder. "Is that terrifying, absolutely terrifying, and wonderful? Good, it should be both." By October, it was understood by everyone in Jerome that Colt Whitmore and Larissa Kendrick were courting seriously. The gossip had died down, replaced by general acceptance and even approval. The children at school teased Emma and Thomas about their papa and teacher, but it was good-natured teasing, not cruel. On a cool evening in late October, with the aspens turning gold in the high country, Colt asked Larissa to marry him. He did it simply, without fanfare, sitting at his kitchen table with his children present because they were part of this decision. "I do not have much to offer," he said, holding a simple gold band that had been his grandmother's. "A ranch that barely makes ends meet, 2 children who come with me as a package, and a heart that has been broken but is healing thanks to you. But if you are willing to take a chance on us, I promise to love you with everything I have for the rest of my life." Larissa looked at the ring, then at Emma and Thomas, then at Colt. Her eyes were shining with tears. "You have everything to offer. A home, a family, a life worth living. "Yes, Colt Whitmore, I will marry you." Emma shrieked with joy and Thomas cheered, and they were instantly surrounded by excited children. Colt slipped the ring on Larissa's finger, and she kissed him in front of his children for the first time, cementing their new reality. They married in November, in the same church where they had first met. Reverend Mitchell performed the ceremony, and the whole town attended. Emma stood up as Larissa's attendant, wearing a new dress that Larissa had made for her. Thomas was Colt's best man, solemn and proud in his responsibilities. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, with vows that acknowledged their unique situation and promised a future built on love and respect. When Colt kissed his new wife, he felt Catherine's memory bless them rather than haunt them. He was not replacing her. He was choosing to live again, to build something new with someone who understood both his past and his hope for the future. The reception was held at the schoolhouse, with food and music and dancing. Colt danced with Larissa with Emma, and even got Thomas to stumble through a few steps. He danced with Mayor Henderson's wife and several of the other prominent ladies, fulfilling his social obligations. But he kept returning to Larissa, drawn to her like a compass to north. They spent their wedding night at the ranch, with Emma and Thomas staying with a neighboring family to give them privacy. Colt carried Larissa over the threshold, feeling both ancient and young, experienced and uncertain. They came together with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies and hearts, creating new memories to add to the old. Afterward, lying in bed with Larissa in his arms, Colt felt a peace he had thought lost forever. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair. "For what?" "For being patient, for loving my children, for helping me remember how to live. Thank you for letting me in, for trusting me with your heart." She tilted her head to look at him. "I know this was not the life you planned, Colt, but I promise to make it a good one. It is already good." "You made it good just by being in it." Larissa settled as seamlessly into ranch life as if she had been born to it. She kept teaching for the rest of the school year, wanting to fulfill her commitment, but helped with the ranch in the mornings and evenings. She brought an organization and efficiency to the household that it had desperately needed, but more than that, she brought warmth. The house that had been just a functional space became a home again. Emma blossomed under Larissa's guidance, growing in confidence and capability. She learned to cook and sew properly, but also continued her education, reading voraciously and discussing ideas with Larissa that Colt could barely follow. Thomas attached himself to Larissa with the complete trust of a young child, calling her Mama within the first month. It happened naturally, without fanfare, and Larissa accepted it with grace and love. The three of them worked out a rhythm, honoring Catherine's memory while building new traditions. They kept a photograph of Catherine in the parlor, and on her birthday and the anniversary of her death, they would gather and share memories. But they also created new celebrations, new rituals that were uniquely theirs as a reformed family. Winter came and went, easier with Larissa's presence. Spring brought new calves and the constant work of a ranch waking from dormancy. And in May, Larissa told Colt she was pregnant. He was in the barn when she found him, her face glowing with joy and nervousness. "Colt, I need to tell you something." The tone of her voice made him set down his tools immediately. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. Everything is right. We are going to have a baby." For a moment he could not process the words. Then they sank in and joy exploded through him like sunrise. He whooped, picked Larissa up and spun her around, then immediately set her down gently as if she were made of glass. "Are you certain?" The doctor confirmed it this morning. "Due in December. A Christmas baby." Colt pulled her close, overwhelmed by gratitude and hope and the sheer miracle of it. "We are going to have a baby." Emma and Thomas were thrilled when they told them that evening. Emma immediately started planning how she would help with the baby, and Thomas asked if it would be a brother or sister with the intense seriousness of a 6-year-old. They talked about names and where the baby would sleep and all the things they would teach their new sibling. That night, alone in their bedroom, Larissa asked quietly, "Are you happy, truly?" "Why would I not be happy? I know you had children with Catherine. I thought maybe you might feel conflicted." Colt took her hands, making sure she could see his face in the lamplight. "I loved Catherine and I love the children we had together. But I also love you and I am thrilled about this baby. This is not replacing anything. This is adding to our family, to our life. Do not ever doubt that I am completely, utterly happy about this." She relaxed against him. "I am happy too. And a little scared. We will figure it out together. That is what we do." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. Larissa stopped teaching to focus on preparing for the baby, though she missed her students and they missed her. The school board hired a replacement, an older woman from Prescott, and life moved forward. In early December, on a cold night with snow threatening, Larissa went into labor. Colt sent for the doctor and the midwife, then paced the house like a caged animal while Emma and Thomas sat nervously in the parlor. The labor was long and hard, and Colt remembered with painful clarity the labors with Emma and Thomas, how Catherine had been so strong through them. When the baby finally came, a healthy boy with a lusty cry, Colt was allowed into the bedroom. Larissa looked exhausted but radiant, holding their son with careful awe. "We have a boy." Colt sat on the edge of the bed, looking at his new son, at the tiny face and waving fists. "He is perfect." "What should we name him?" They had discussed names but had not settled on anything. Looking at his son, Colt knew immediately. Samuel James Whitmore, after your father." "Yes, and James for your father." "Samuel James." Larissa tested the name. "I like it. Hello, Samuel." The baby made a small sound, and Colt felt his heart expand to encompass this new person, this new life they had created together. Emma and Thomas were brought in to meet their new brother, and they were awed by the tiny infant. Emma held him with careful confidence while Thomas touched his hand gently, amazed by the smallness of the fingers. "He is really ours?" Thomas asked. "He is really ours," Larissa confirmed. "Your baby brother." "I am going to teach him everything," Emma declared. "How to raid and ride and be brave." Watching his family, this beautifully complicated blended family, Colt felt a completeness he had never expected to feel again. He had been broken, had thought himself beyond repair. But his children had seen what he could not, had chosen Larissa before he knew she was what he needed. They had been wiser than him, braver than him, and they had given him permission to live again, to love again, to build something new from the ashes of what he had lost. Life settled into a new normal with baby Samuel. The nights were sleepless, the days exhausting, but they managed together. Larissa nursed the baby while Colt handled more of the household tasks and cooking. Emma and Thomas helped where they could, fetching diapers and entertaining their brother with silly faces. The ranch continued to thrive, the windmill providing reliable water even through the dry months. Colt hired another hand to help with the work, needing the extra help with a new baby in the house. Money was still tight, but they were making it work. As Samuel grew from newborn to infant, his personality emerged. He was a happy baby, quick to smile, with Catherine's green eyes and Larissa's determined expression. Emma doted on him constantly. Thomas was a protective big brother, and Colt found himself marveling at how love did not divide among children but simply multiplied. In the spring, Larissa surprised him with another announcement. "I want to start a library." They were sitting on the porch after dinner, Samuel sleeping in her arms, the other children playing in the yard. A library. Jerome does not have one. Books are expensive and hard to come by. But if we could gather donated books and find a space, we could create a lending library for the town. Education does not stop with school, Colt. People need access to books. He looked at his wife, at the passion in her face, and fell in love with her all over again. Then we will start a library. Where would we put it? The old assay office that closed last year. It is sitting empty. If we could rent it for cheap, clean it up, build some shelves. I can build shelves, and we know half the town. We could ask for book donations. Over the next months, they worked together to make Larissa's vision a reality. They negotiated a low rent on the empty building, cleaned it thoroughly, and Colt built sturdy shelves with help from some of the men in town. Larissa put out a call for book donations, and the response was overwhelming. People contributed books they had brought west and never opened, volumes they had read until they fell apart, new books ordered special from back east. By summer, the Jerome Public Library opened, with Larissa as the volunteer librarian. It was small, just one room with a few hundred books, but it was a start. Children came to borrow adventure stories, women borrowed novels, men borrowed farming journals and histories. The library became a gathering place, a sign that Jerome was becoming more than just a mining town, that it had culture and community. Emma spent hours at the library, reading everything she could find. Thomas preferred stories about cowboys and Indians, which he would act out with elaborate imagination. Even baby Samuel seemed to love the library, cooing happily when surrounded by books. The years rolled forward with the kind of gentle consistency that defined good lives. Emma grew into a young woman, bright and determined, with plans to attend normal school and become a teacher like Larissa. Thomas became a capable ranch hand, learning the business from Colt with enthusiasm. Samuel grew into a curious, active boy who asked 1,000 questions and got into 1,000 mishaps. In their 6th year of marriage, Larissa gave birth to their second child together, a daughter they named Catherine Sarah. Colt held his new daughter with tears in his eyes, the name honoring his first wife with Larissa's full blessing. She would want to be remembered this way, Larissa had said, in a new life, a new beginning. Little Catherine, called Katie by everyone, was a spirited child with Larissa's honey-colored eyes and Colt's stubborn determination. She and Samuel were constant companions, partners in crime and creativity. The ranch prospered, slowly but steadily. Colt expanded the herd, bought more land, hired more help. They were not rich, but they were comfortable, secure in ways he had not been in those desperate early years after Catherine's death. Larissa continued running the library while raising their children and supporting the ranch. She never went back to teaching formally, but she taught informally constantly, through the library programs she created and the example she set for the children. Emma graduated from school and went to normal school as planned, returning to Jerome to teach. She took over the classroom where Larissa had once taught, and Colt felt the beautiful symmetry of it. Thomas decided against further schooling, preferring to work the ranch. At 18, he was a capable cowhand, and Colt knew the ranch would be in good hands when he eventually passed it on. Samuel, at 10, was already showing signs of wanderlust, talking about seeing California or maybe even going back east to college. Colt encouraged the dreaming, knowing his son would find his own path. Katie, at 4, was still too young to know what she wanted, but she had her mother's love of learning and her father's practical skills, a combination that would serve her well. One evening in late summer, the whole family gathered on the porch for dinner. It was a scene Colt had dreamed of in those dark days after Catherine's death, but never thought he would actually have. Emma was home visiting from her teaching job in a neighboring town. Thomas sat with Samuel, discussing horses and cattle. Katie was in Larissa's lap, chattering about something that had happened at the library. Colt looked at them all, his family, built from grief and love and second chances. He thought about Catherine, gone now for more than a decade but never forgotten. He thought about the children who had chosen Larissa before he had been wise enough to see her clearly. He thought about all the unlikely events and decisions that had brought them to this moment. Larissa caught his eye across the table and smiled, that same warm smile that had first drawn him to her all those years ago. She mouthed the words, "I love you," and he mouthed them back, feeling the truth of them in every cell of his body. After dinner, when the children had scattered to various activities, Colt and Larissa walked out to the windmill, standing beneath its great turning blades in the cooling evening air. This windmill that she had suggested, that had saved his ranch, had become a symbol for their relationship. She had brought solutions when he had only seen problems. She had brought hope when he had only felt despair. "What are you thinking about?" Larissa asked, leaning against him. "About how my children were smarter than me, about how they saw what I needed before I could see it myself. They are exceptional children, all of them. Because of you, because you loved them when they needed love, taught them when they needed teaching, and gave me the space to figure out how to be a father again." Larissa turned to face him, cupping his face in her hands. "You were always a good father, Colt. You just needed help carrying the load. That is not weakness. That is being human." "I am grateful," he said simply. "For you, for our life, for every day I get to wake up and see your face. Even when I am grumpy before coffee, especially then." He kissed her, slow and deep, a kiss that still carried passion after years of marriage. "I love you, Larissa Whitmore. I love you too, Colt." They stood there as the sun set over the Arizona landscape, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. The windmill turned steadily, drawing water from deep underground, sustaining life in a harsh land. The house behind them glowed with lamplight and echoed with the voices of their children. Colt had been a widower who thought his life was over, who was just surviving for the sake of his children. But those children had seen clearly, had chosen Larissa with the unerring instinct of young hearts who knew what they needed. And in doing so, they had saved their father, given him permission to live again, to love again, to build a future he had thought impossible. Emma had been right all those years ago. They had chosen better than he could have. Not because Larissa was perfect or because she replaced what was lost, but because she was exactly what their broken family needed to become whole again. She had honored the past while building the future, loved his children as her own while giving him new children to love, and shown him that the human heart was capable of healing even when it seemed shattered beyond repair. The stars emerged one by one in the darkening sky, and Colt Whitmore stood with his wife beneath them, grateful for second chances, for wise children, and for love that found him when he had stopped looking for it. His ranch would prosper, his children would grow and flourish, and the family they had built together from grief and hope would endure. It was more than he had dared to dream in those dark days after Catherine's death. It was everything, and it was enough. The years ahead would bring their own challenges and joys. Emma would marry and have children of her own, bringing grandchildren for Colt and Larissa to spoil. Thomas would take over more of the ranch operations, eventually bringing home a wife who loved the land as much as he did. Samuel would indeed leave for California, seeking adventure, but he would always come home to the ranch where he was raised. Katie would grow into a formidable woman who combined her mother's intelligence with her father's determination, eventually becoming a doctor, one of the first women in Arizona territory to do so. But all of that was still to come. Tonight, it was enough to stand with Larissa and know that they had built something good and true and lasting. That his children had chosen wisely, had seen what he needed before he could see it himself, and had given him the gift of a second chance at happiness. The windmill turned, the stars shone, and Colt Whitmore was, finally and completely, at peace. The widower cowboy whose children had chosen her first had realized they had chosen better than he ever could have, and in that realization he had found not just survival, but life itself.